Republican lawmakers are falling quickly in line behind Donald Trump and once again brushing aside his controversial rhetoric on the campaign trail, whether it's about praising the January 6 prisoners or accusing Jewish voters who support Democrats of hating their religion. Yet there is a contingent of Republicans that is done with Donald Trump. Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska is part of that group. The moderate Republican is thinking about her place in the GOP and would not rule out becoming an independent.
I don't think that it can be defended. What happened on January 6th was an effort by people who stormed a building in an effort to stop an election. I wish that as Republicans we had a nominee that I could get behind. I certainly can't get behind Donald Trump.
Are you considering being an independent at this point?
Oh, I think I'm very independent-minded.
Officially, though, officially.
I just regret that our party is seemingly becoming a party of Donald Trump.
Yeah. You becoming an independent caucusing with the Republicans, is that something you're open to?
I am navigating my way through some very interesting political times. Let's just leave it at that.
She's navigating her way through interesting political times. That is quite a statement. So you've been, Carl, you've been covering Murkowski for years. Do you think she might actually leave the GOP? And what does it say about the party?
She's very, very troubled by what's happening in the Republican Party. And she's getting really vocal about it, which I think is part of her process here. She did win as a write-in candidate once before when she lost the Republican primary. She's tough, you know. She's going to be able to weather whatever attacks come her way. I think in the Republican conference in the Senate right now is the biggest split I think I've ever seen. I've talked to members about this. Their lunches are very acrimonious. There's a big, big difference. And I think her, Susan Collins, some other members who say they will never support Trump, you know, they're kind of beating up against the tide of their own membership. And I think that election primary in Ohio last week was very telling to people like Lisa Murkowski. There was a big establishment primary Republican candidate who was easily defeated, much more easily, I think, than we expected, by the more MAGA-aligned candidate. And you know, you look at her, and her father was such a big Republican politician. It's like, what's become of our party? And they're worried about it.
Yeah, look, she's had such a fascinating track through the Republican Party, right. The Tea Party wing. She sustained that. She ran as a write-in candidate. She voted opposed Brett Kavanaugh at the Supreme Court. She voted to convict Donald Trump. She won her race, though, in 2022, despite being attacked.
But under the new election system that was set up to help her.
And it helped her, exactly. So, this is obviously almost a rinse and repeat moment for so many Republicans. Trump says controversial things, and Republicans either try to sidestep it, brush it off, and try to hope the news cycle moves on. He talked about January 6 hostages and prisoners, calling them patriots. That was at his rally just last week in Ohio. And I put that question to a lot of Republicans who have been angry about January 6 and are still very concerned about everything that happened that day, about whether they're okay with what he said.
Folks, I was the last Senate member out of the chamber on January the 6th. I saw Capitol Police officers bleeding, bruised, and I saw damage to a certain extent as we were exiting. To call those people patriots is not in my lexicon.
Those individuals that have been found guilty, I do not consider them to be patriots.
Do you think it was appropriate for the former president to call January 6 prisoners hostages and threaten to say that he may pardon them?
Well, I mean, I think he's used that language before. I don't think that's anything new.
And, of course, that's the number 2 Republican who wants to be the Republican leader, right. Saying he's used that language before.
I mean, this is, like you said, this is a cycle that we see time and time again, and we certainly saw it when Trump was president the last time. You have some Republicans in Congress who will very harshly criticize things he says or take issue with them. But at the end of the day, and we're starting to see this come to a head now, and I think this is part of the reason that Murkowski is becoming more anguished and publicly vocal about where she sits in this situation. he's the nominee. He's going to be the nominee. And so whereas you had a very interesting split, I think, among Senate leaders, some Senate Republican leaders, before the primary process had really played itself out, where Mitch McConnell had not said anything, John Thune had not said anything. He's now, this is happening, and everyone realizes he's the nominee. He's going to be their candidate. And so the party is falling into line behind him, even as some of them will say critical things. The bottom line is they are supporting him because he is their party's nominee, and it's a very uncomfortable place for a lot of them to be.
In the way some of them explain this also is interesting. Cynthia Lummis, who's a Wyoming Republican senator, I asked her about Trump's comments saying that voters who support Jewish voters who support Democrats must hate their religion. One of the things he did say, which is controversial, is he said that Jews who vote for Democrats hate their religion, hate their country. What do you think about that?
Well, there again, he has a remarkable way of communicating. It's not the way I would communicate, and it's probably why he is the nominee again, and he's so successful, and the rest of us aren't. It is a very unique style. I'm not going to say I understand it, but it works for him.
That's the voice of leadership there. Look, I think the reason perhaps all of this matters and what Senator Murkowski is obviously wrestling with, and you mentioned Ohio, this is the politics, but there's a policy component of this too. And I was in Ohio this week and just hearing Governor Mike DeWine, former senator, their candidate, Matt Dolan, supported by Rob Portman, he was the establishment, but Governor DeWine was trying to make the argument for foreign policy reasons, to support Ukraine, the old wing of the party. This is why you must vote for the establishment candidate. It fell flat. I mean, he lost by nearly 20 points. So the politics are obvious, but the policy differences here that are sort of coming to the fore in the MAGA era are also at the root of the Murkowski anger and at the root of all this discontent here. And is a Ukraine bill going to make it through the Senate? I mean, that's a question as well. We talked about the House stuff, so that's why all this matters. But you're going to get a lot of steps in for the next 7.5 months.
As I tend to
you
do,
always do, asking these senators about Trump, because you will have something every week to say and consumes all the options.
And you mentioned Ohio, because Bernie Moreno, who won the Republican nomination in that critical Senate primary last week, backed by Donald Trump, he was actually on Capitol Hill last week, and during his campaign, he cut an ad saying this is what it said in the ad: entire system rigged against the people. President Trump says the election was stolen, and he is right. Now, my colleague Ted Barrett, who runs around those hallways with me as well, caught up with Bernie Moreno, and he asked him about whether or not Donald Trump, whether or not the 2020 election was stolen. He said, "Oh my gosh, are we talking about that? We've had like 3 elections since then. The reality is we're going to look to the future. The people in Ohio, what they care about is when they go to McDonald's, they can't afford French fries." So he notably did not, Carl, embrace the idea that the election was stolen when Ted asked him multiple times.
But he doesn't want to talk about it.
Because we're in a general election.
Right. But it's going to, and we're seeing the same thing in Arizona, where the Carrie Lake, who's an election denier, is now trying to move away from that. They think that's not a good idea. But I think you've also hit on something. I think for the members, January 6th, they were there. And when they hear Donald Trump talk about the people who were on the verge of attacking them personally as hostages, I really think that hits them deeply, and I think they're really struggling with that.
Yeah.
If they're going to have to go through the campaign season with that, but this is general election time. People want to change the way they talk, but they're going to have. There's a lot of video and a lot of quotes about what they have said.
Exactly, including that ad. I'm sure will be replayed.
If it makes you feel any better, I have already put evac on alert. He's ready to go if it comes to that. General, I assure you.
Hey, General, let me into the war room to see you, so I had to hack my way onto this frequency.
This better be critical, Wheelie.
Sir, come on, what is it now, please? Okay, couple of things. I'm running low on the dough. I was thinking about taking a couple of months sick leave, maybe starting today. And, oh yeah. I intercepted a transmission from Megatron.
Then send it through.
Yes, sir, right away, sir. And so I'll assume that we're going on the other stuff.
This is your last warning, insects. Relinquish what remains of the Allspark,
So who's the insect? You? What? Who's the insect?
Protect you. They were defeated on our world, and we will defeat them here.
This was just a diversion. Security, please bring up. Rabbit, she's already inside. Deeds! Give me an update on that reserve. Boss readiness. What was his name? What was it?
Evac, sir.
Right, evac.
She's right in front.
We're facing a heavy sustained attack. They appear to be after the All-Star. General! General!